What's the most ridiculous thing you heard a man refuse to do because it was too feminine or for girls? Story 1. I worked with a guy who refused to pee sitting down. I asked him, what about when he's taking a dump? And he said he stands to pee first, then sits to. I said, that's just crazy. And he said, chicks sit to pee. I said, chicks sit to too. Why don't you standing up? And he just got angry. Story 2. My boss, at a previous job, didn't understand why none of his 3 children would speak to him. Then, after a coworker returned from paternity leave, he proudly proclaimed that he had never changed a diaper in his life because it was women's work, and I'm guessing that's where it started. Story 3. OMG. Where to start? My less than average yet highly narcissistic ex-husband had a huge list of these hang-ups. He wouldn't use a straw, he wouldn't use an umbrella, he wouldn't hold my purse when I went into the restroom. He said that I loved my cats because they were like females. His twisted logic for this? They are called felines and mine had long hair so it made them look like female cats. Divorcing him was my best move ever, for many reasons. Story 4. Change a newborn girl's diaper. She had too many nooks and crannies. We are divorcing. ETA, thank you for the awards, Relectrolu, and my anonymous friend. Story 5. There was a young Marine at one of my husband's command picnics who snatched his 3-year-old son off the ground by his ear hair and beat him while screaming about how no son of his was going to be a sissy or a fot. The toddler's crime? He had plopped down on the blanket with his sister and some other little girls who were playing teddy bear tea party. Dad left in handcuffs with a bleeding face, and we never saw the wife or the kids on base again. I hope she was able to keep those kids far away from that psycho. I think of that sweet little boy often, and hope that he is having a great life without his so-called father. Story 6, not 100 the same, but I once worked with a guy who said watching heterosexual was gay, because how are you getting hard watching another man get hard? Story 7. Masculinity, a power so great it can only be undermined by the color pink, umbrellas in drinks, TV shows with any level of emotion, being in the same room as a same attracted man. Anything, really. Edit didn't expect this to be so big. A huge thanks to everyone sharing their stories. You are making a very grumpy old man happy. Story 8. In the mid-2000s, my middle-aged father was made fun of and called a metrosexual for using hand lotion before a formal business meeting with a group of salespeople. In recent years, he was diagnosed with skin cancer, and the nurses at his dermatologist's office praised him enthusiastically for his long-term dedication to using lotion. He apologized to them on behalf of his words, the crusty fuckwits they have to deal with on a daily basis, and said that he couldn't imagine having to do their jobs because so many men my age are disgusting and won't clean themselves because they think it's for women. He told this story again for Father's Day yesterday. I love my dad. He's great. Story 9. Technically doesn't count, as they were able to courageously fight through their doubt, but it's still my favorite. Was at brunch for my partner's birthday, and there were 2 frat bro kind of guys at the table next to us. One of them said, I don't know, man. I just feel like my ears perked up, wondering what feeling or need he was struggling to accept and express. I just feel like I kind of want a mimosa. Fortunately, his friend was receptive. Fuck it, bro. Let's do it. Let's get mimosas. In that beautiful, vulnerable moment, those 2 frat bros were able to shed the mantle of oppressive, toxic masculinity and order the fizzy bubble alcohol orange juice they were so ashamed to crave. Story 10. I work in a call center. One of my colleagues refuses to learn touch typing because it's girly. It's painful watching him type notes into his computer. Story 11. I live in Texas and I'm not kidding. My coworker once said it's okay for women to be Democrats progressive because they are emotional, idealistic, and irrational. Men, on the other hand, need to be the voice of logic and reason. Story 12. I worked in a hospital setting, but in the corporate office. We didn't work with the patients, but we had to be trained on safety procedures and the different hospital codes. My boss, who was a nice guy otherwise, said he would refuse to give CPR to another man in an emergency life or death scenario, and I thought it was completely ridiculous. Story 13. This doesn't exactly answer the question, but once in the middle of a rainstorm, I went out with a big black umbrella. I passed a guy who was soaked to the skin. He looked at me with genuine hate and said, I didn't know how to process it. An umbrella is just a tool anyone can use, men, women, children, to get completely soaked. Rather than use one, I just don't know where that comes from. Edit. This happened to me in the USA, Rhode Island, and it happened once in a lifetime of otherwise unchallenged umbrella use. So it hasn't affected my long-term use in any way. My brother-in-law refused to buy feminine hygiene products for his wife. I never understood that. I always bought them for my wife. I mean, it's obvious they are not for me. Story 14. I actually weep for these kinds of men who only get to live half a life. Imagine not feeling like you could enjoy the whole of the human experience because of being that scared of femininity. Story 15. My ex was super offended when I gave him bath foam and salts, etc. for birthday. He loved taking long baths. He said it would be okay for him to gift it to me to use together, but not the other way around. Story 16. Drinking water. He said he doesn't need to drink water. Men just tough it out. This was on a blazing hot summer day when there was plenty of water to go around. Story 17. Washing your feet after a long day at work instead of just letting them stink up the apartment. Drinking water when too drunk. Cleaning up used napkins and takeout containers from the coffee table. Changing booze, sweaty bedding. My brother, 40, refuses to do these things and will eventually cave after I, his brother, 34, lectures him for 10 minutes. Story 18. Skincare. I dated someone that worked construction outdoors. A real beer-drinking, cigar-smoking man's man. His skin was turning into leather, but he refused to moisturize or clean it properly. One day, I forcefully implemented an at-home self-care spa day on him. Mud mask, exfoliation, cleanse, sheet mask, serums, cold eye packs, moisturizer. He had half of Sephora on his face. Afterwards, he was radiant and said he felt pretty and liked how nice it smelled. They don't know until they know. Once while shopping at a drugstore, I caught him looking at a bottle and saying, "Ooh, it exfoliates and moisturizes. And smells like pineapple, I like that. I'm gonna get this." Story 19. Used to work at a craft shop. Men would stand outside in the 90-degree heat. No seats or shade. Rather than come in a girl's store. Heat stroke is manly, I guess. Story 20. I work with a guy who doesn't have an umbrella cause men just deal with it. Told him he better not drive home then so he can really deal with it properly. Story 21. Shower. I know a guy that showers once a week through colder months and twice a week during warmer months. Warm months here are between 30 to 40 Celsius. Showering more than twice a week is too feminine, and in his words, gay. Fellas, is it gay to be clean and smell nice? Story 22. One season of Canada's Worst Handyman had a guy refer to every task he didn't like, which I think was anything that wasn't straight-up destruction as woman's work. Sewing, painting, plumbing. Story 23. Wear anything pink. I once had an ex-boyfriend refuse to accept, let alone wear, a Valentine's gift tie I bought him because it was red with a pink pattern. It was an acid-etched paisley pattern on a silk tie you could barely see, but because the outline was pink. It was a no-go for him. I didn't hear the end of it for months, but you may ask, well, what did he get you? The answer is a mini box of own-brand reduced chocolate and a picture of us together. Not a nicely framed one either, but one he printed on paper and put in the card without any frame at all. I'm ashamed to say we were together for a whole year afterwards, and the next Valentine's Day, I bought him a single long stem rose because who says flowers are just for women? My ex, apparently. Yeah, there's a reason he became my ex-boyfriend. I was young, naive, and he was my first proper boyfriend. I personally love a guy comfortable enough to wear an accent of pink shirt, socks, pocket napkin, tie, braces, etc. But the tie I bought wasn't even fully pink. That's what got me. Quick edit. For anyone wondering what the tie looked like, it was very similar to this one here. Similar red and pink pattern tie to the one I bought. Only it wasn't a wedding tie. It was from his favorite shop that sold suits from their office collection. Story 24. Every single thing. There's no thing that is factually too feminine for guys. Heels were originally a thing for male nobility. A kilt is basically a skirt, and there were times men have worn dresses. The most ridiculous one for me is basically thinking that anything that is even remotely pleasant is for women. If you're a man, you have to do the basic no comfort included version. Men have to do it the tough way. Also wearing pink. Pink has always been one of my favorite colors, and I always thought it was dumb how men could be afraid of a color. Story 25. I once heard someone say that when he gets married and have a kid, he won't hold the kid while walking the streets with their wife, even if the wife was wanting to do SM because that's the mom job, and I was speechless. Story 26. When I worked night shift stocking shelves at Target, dudes would refuse to work the feminine products aisle. Apparently, touching plastic packages full of unused paper products would contaminate them with the concept of menses. At least I got to learn about all the symbols on the packages so I could buy them for future wife. Story 27. My dad, who is usually not this much of an idiot, refused to use my reusable shopping bag with the female symbol on it. He went all the way back to the car to get a different one. We were just at the grocery store FFS. Story 28. My boss and I used to use the same type of Bic mechanical pencil, and we'd each get variety packs. The variety packs had different colored clips on each black pencil. Every time he found a pink, purple, or light blue clipped pencil on his desk or in his hand, he would say, "I think this is yours." If he saw me using a green, yellow, or red clipped pencil, he would say, "Is that my pencil?" Story 29. My father refused to have anything to do with cooking or cleaning, unless it was BBQing, which was fine. He once stood next to the oven and called me from my room so I could open the oven and check on the lasagna. 30 seconds later, I was called back so I could clear the table. Story 30. Ooh, I've got one. I'm literally tattooing on the guy and say, okay, just have magenta and gold, then we're done. And he, you not says magenta? What are you, queer? Just call it pink. Don't need to have fancy names for. Like, dude, I have 10 different shades of pink in this drawer. It's kind of my whole job to know the difference, lol. Also, you're the one getting permanently colored pink in this spot. And you want to call me gay for knowing the name? Cracked me up. A friend's husband refused to wear clothing with patterns because that's gay IDK. I really just don't know where that came from. Story 31. I was in line at Avis to rent a car, and the man in front of me was angry and being A to the employee because the car they gave him was a chick car, and he refused to drive it. The car was a Jetta, not a pink Fiat 500 or anything. Such a regular, common, inoffensive car that I never imagined anyone could assign a gender to it. Just ridiculous. I ended up with the Jetta he didn't want, and I quite liked driving it. Story 32. My dad would leave the store and wait outside if I needed my mom to buy pads or tampons for me while I was home from college. I already knew my husband is rad, but reading this thread reinforces it. He's studying nursing, clearly not fazed being in a field dominated by women. He got manicures on my recommendation because his nails were getting brittle in winter. He'd get clear polish, but he had no problem with getting his nails done with me. I taught him to knit when we were dating. He's secure in who he is, so he hasn't bothered doing anything stereotyped as feminine. Story 33. I bought my crew coffees once at work, and I was labeling the cups, because from the outside they all look the same. I put an M on the lid of my cup for my name, Mac. And as I got to Danny's cup, he said, don't put a D on my cup. That's gay. Apparently the D means, and he can't drink out of a cup. The whole ordeal made me die laughing. Story 34. When I was 18 working retail, to pass the time we would toss hypothetical questions. One question that was asked was something along the lines of, would you stick a up your for $1 million? Every guy except one said of course. This one guy was repulsed and proclaimed it made you instantly gay. Now, as a middle-aged heterosexual man who's happily married, butt stuff is. Story 35. Buy tampons for GF sister wife. Wash their legs, wipe after pooping. Order a fruity alcohol beverage. McKay. Chad. Well, my drink has more alcohol in it than your crappy beer, and it's more fun to look at. So enjoy that, I guess. Wear chapstick, use face wash, or use lotion. Lotion is for everyone. Geez. Really, any self-care products at all? Bro, nobody wants to kiss your crusty dry lips and rub up against your dry, scratchy elbows in their bed. I wish I was kidding about any of these, I really do. Story 36. I've never heard this from a man, but I keep hearing from women on Reddit about men who don't wipe their asses because they think it's gay. It's so unfathomable to me that I remain skeptical. But the frequency of this and the details of the story seem pretty legitimate. Personally, though, especially with how hairy men's asses can get, I just can't imagine this. I mean, every now and then I will end up not wiping thoroughly enough, usually from a combination of being in a rush and being in a place with quarter-ply tissue paper in those dispensers that limit how much TP you can get out at a time. And within an hour or so, I am so itchy and uncomfortable I have to go to the bathroom again to fix it. How are these men walking around with unwiped asses and not feeling just miserable? Story 37. My buddy in college refused to eat quiche, called it girly breakfast. We were at a brunch spot, and he ordered a massive plate of bacon and eggs instead. The waitress comes back and tells him they're out of bacon. Without missing a beat, he says, fine, we'll have the quiche, but can you put it in a beer mug? The entire table, including the waitress, lost it. To this day, we still call him quiche in a mug. Story 38. A middle-aged divorcee at a very cheap backpackers hostel in London, where I was staying whilst I looked for a place for my 6-month work stint. He'd been there for months. I was ironing my work stuff and he said he'd rather throw his shirts away than iron as that was too womanly. But kudos to me, I'd make a very nice husband for someone one day. I mean, seriously? Story 39. Didn't want to take his girlfriend's cat to the vet, because a man holding a cat is feminine. Blew my mind. Dude is a cop too. BTW. A dude at this Walmart I used to work at refused to sweep because he deemed it women's work. Patriarchy doublespeak is something else. Women are expected to go from their father's authority to their husband. Yet men are the ones discouraged from 90 of skills for basic self-preservation. Story 40. Wear a coat. Like, ah yes. I'm sure your flimsy band hoodie and the roaring flame of your own masculinity will be more than enough to keep you warm in sub-zero temps. Story 41. Use a pink-handled tool. Mom had the damnedest time trying to keep Dad from getting into her for inside the house toolkit and swiping pieces and leaving them somewhere in the garage never to be seen again. Until she bought a toolkit with all pink handles. He wouldn't dare touch that kit lest a neighbor see him using a pink screwdriver. Lol. He used his garage tools and that kit stayed put together after that. Story 42. Cook food for himself. Dude lived with mom until he got married. When he got divorced, he moved back in with his mom, until eventually he married my mom. He's never cooked a single dinner in his life. Oh, wait. Except on the grill. Can't expect a woman to understand how a grill works after all. That would be as wild as thinking a man could learn to use the stove. Story 43. Use a straw. I seriously had a waitress tell me, real men don't use straws. I responded, real men do as they like and don't care what others think. Story 44. Carry some sort of bag to keep their stuff in. Get a messenger bag then? Although my general understand is that guys in Germany are big on sling bags. Come on, Southern US. I am tired of carrying men's stuff for them because they are afraid they will be accused of carrying a purse. Story 45. When my high school boyfriend and I were getting ready for prom, I asked if he planned to match his tie to my dress, because that's what pretty much everyone was doing. He refused, not because matching your date was gay, but because the color of my dress was way too girly and he didn't want to wear a girl color. My dress was a very dark blue-green. It still baffles me, lol. Story 46. Been told I'm stupid and not manly for preferring cocktails to beer on the rare occasion I drink. Also been told to man up and get hammered because I'm sober. Story 47. I had a conversation with a guy once where he said he has to cut bananas up to eat them because they're too phallic-shaped. I was like, you shouldn't have to prove your sexuality this hard. If you were really straight, you wouldn't have to prove it to anyone. He did not like that. Story 48. The first thing that popped into my mind is that clip of DJ Khaled talking about how he doesn't go down on his wife but that he expects her to go down on him. What a loser. Story 49. Apparently there is a subsect of men out there who are of the belief that washing, or even wiping, their asses makes them gay. So they happily go along living their lives with literal stank. I feel especially terrible for their wives and mothers who, among other things, do their laundry. What even are we teaching young women that they're willing to go along with this literal? I'm not sure how these guys justify masturbation. Story 50. First date. He was disgusted by my arm hair. I am blonde. But when I said I'd shave it if he'd shave his own arm hair, he claimed that that was not what the man is supposed to do. Got him never dating again. Story 51. Use pink post-its. Like refused at work to take it with a number on it because it was pink. That said, I am not much better. I will buy feminine products for my wife all day. I have no problem caring for my favorite vagina. Story 52. Not sure if it counts, but my fiance's friend threw a fit on a second date because she wanted him to take a personality test and he just absolutely refused. We tried to calm him down and said that's just what some girls like to do as an icebreaker, and he said, I ain't no simp. Story 53. My uncle said he wouldn't let any of his sons join the Boy Scouts because they let trans and gay boys in now, so it's too feminized. The literal Boy Scouts. Hilariously, this dude is in his 60s and still lives with his mom and never had kids. He just loved to talk about what he'd do if he had them. It's okay to live with your parents at any age, but that household is a nightmare, and he is crazy codependent on his mom for everything. Story 54. Jesus. The amount of things that make us men gay is long and dumb. At this point, I wouldn't be surprised to hear that having with a woman is gay because another guy might have hit it. Good God. Story 55. I remember once getting for putting a band-aid on a cut for that exact reason. Like sorry for not wanting to bleed on everything or get dirt in an open wound, I guess. Story 56. Send a fax. I showed him how to do it multiple times and then heard him say, get a skirt to do it for you. That's a skirt job. I refused to help him again and got in trouble for being a meanie. This was in 2010. He was 25. Story 57. Drink through a straw. Like I can understand preferring a beer mug over a dainty wine glass because beer mugs hold more and are generally less likely to break. But straws? Such a weird thing to genderize. Story 58. At work, the single-stall restrooms used to be labeled men's and women's. They're now genital, non-gendered restrooms. A man at work still won't use the former women's restroom. Story 59. After reading all the comments, I have concluded that my superpower is doing 989. 9 of the gayest things in the world and yet still straight. Putting this on my resume. Story 60. Ride passenger on a quad, even though he was stranded in the middle of the woods. He sat on the front, which is funny to me because if we crashed, he would rather slam into a tree before the quad did than to sit on the back of the quad. Story 61. Take a nap. That's such a sissy thing, he said. Don't know whatever happened to him, but I've been married for 35 years to a great guy who naps with me all the time. Story 62. I used to live near a state college and would do work at the college. The health department on campus put flyers in the men's bathroom that it was okay to wipe your own rear end and that it did not make you gay. Story 63. I was drinking a Tito's and Red Bull watermelon that was pink. Guy asked what it was and I told him and offered a taste. Hell no, I'm not drinking a pink drink. Story 64. Being attracted to strong-built women because they look too masculine. Liking women with short hair for the same above reason. Liking women is loungewear because that's what my boy wears. Those clothes for dudes. Specifically, giving to their female partner because that's what gay dudes do. Being a bottom submissive switch. I'm sure there's more. I'm forgetting. Story 65. A boomer once told me it was a disgrace for a man to change his own child's nappy when he found out I share all parenting with my wife. I responded that it was a disgrace for a grown man to be afraid to help raise his own child. He did not take it well. Story 66. I was visiting a friend's house once for a birthday. I was in the kitchen, and he was on the couch in the living room. He asked if I could bring him a drink. I did so because, why not? An hour later, he was in the kitchen, and I was in the living room. I asked if he could grab me a piece of cake and bring it to me. He just looked at me like I'd grown a second head and said, "No." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he came back to the living room and sat down. No explanation. Later, I mentioned it to his wife and she just sighed and said her husband didn't think it was right for a man to wait on a woman. They are in one of the more cult-adjacent Christian sects and I'd known him for years. It really made me reevaluate him as a friend that he couldn't be bothered to carry a piece of cake for 10 feet because I had ovaries. Story 67. I have an online friend who refuses to use chapstick. I'll never forget the answer he gave when I asked him why. Well, boys and girls put it on the same, don't they? Apparently you only use chapstick if you… Story 68. Laundry. Cook dinner. Sit on the side of the table with guests instead of at the head of the table, where the man sits. Seek medical care for serious injuries. Find better ways to do blue-collar work to avoid serious injuries and long-term dysfunction. Be nice to a cat. Any cat. Ever. What the even is that? Who hates an animal? I've literally seen grown men flinch and run from them. Get that cat out of my face. Like, sir, you are 40 and this cat sleeps with a stuffed mouse. Are you kidding me? Wash his own dishes. Literally, if a woman with a functional body can do a thing, there are men who won't do it because a woman did it. Can't wait till that keeps those kinds of men out of public and off the highways. Story 69. Put on a band-aid after he cut himself while cooking. We were roommates. He cut himself and was bleeding. I offered him the first aid kit, and he said he didn't want it because he wasn't a little. I reminded him that irrespective of his status, he was a biohazard, and his options were to either put on a band-aid or GTFO of my kitchen. Story 70. I'm 42 years old. As a kid, my stepfather would routinely berate me for looking in the mirror because I was being a FT. To this day, I have a hard time looking at myself in the mirror. Story 71. Cry. Grown men. Afraid to cry. I'm sure people have mentioned all these before, but this is all one guy. Reading. Washing your own. Spending time with your own children. Cats are gay. Small dogs are for girls and gay. All geese are Canadian and gay. Doing dishes. Cleaning, organizing. Shrek is for girls. Basic manners are too feminine. Riding a bike is feminine. Sneezing in public is too feminine. Soccer is too feminine, but choreographed wrestling is the best thing ever. Yo-yos are cool, but people who can do tricks are too feminine. Yu-Gi-Oh!, MTG, and Pokemon are feminine and gay. People with long hair are girls, or feminine gays unless you're Aussie. Singing is feminine. Caring about others. Changing diapers is for girls. Ugh, what else? That's prob enough dredging through memories for now. Story 72. Dear God, reading these replies makes me so grateful for my pedicure getting, toenail polish wearing, dog snuggling, cries at the drop of a hat husband. Story 73. Sadly, as someone who used to work in retail, it was always women I overheard reinforcing gendered on kids. A mother wouldn't let her young son have green bed sheets because green is apparently for girls. WTF? A mother wouldn't let her young son have the entirely neutral school backpack he picked out because zoo animals are apparently for girls. A mother wouldn't let her young daughter have the Nutcracker Christmas plushie she picked out because it was for boys. The most frustrating part of all of these examples was the mothers had asked the child to choose the item they wanted and then immediately rejected the child's choice. Why give them a choice in the first place if you're just going to shame the child for making the wrong decision? Story 74. Cover some skin blemishes with foundation. Makeup is stuff that was a mineral and is now packed into popular brands. Makeup is for skin, if you ask me. Story 75. Guy I worked with couldn't say the word vagina in a clinical context because that would be gay. He also didn't believe in performing oral on women, again, because that would be gay. Story 76. I find guys who refuse to cook especially funny, given how often it can be a huge turn-on for women. And men, if you swing that way, like purely in the interest of being A, learning to cook is a slam dunk way into someone else's pants. Story 77. Any kind of standard hygiene washing your will not turn you gay, Kyle, but it might make it possible for women to be within 10 feet of you without their eyes watering. Story 78. I worked with a guy that asked if I would take a gallon of milk to the car for him that he bought inside a gas station. His words, "I don't want people to see me taking milk out to my truck," as he walked out with a 24-pack of Busch Light. Story 79. Brought his tiny male dog, probably a Yorkie, or similar, to the vet for a checkup. The clerk asked if they wanted to schedule a neutering appointment, and the man angrily refused, saying the dog needed to keep his manhood. Story 80. I was watching a TikTok video of a guy doing a cover-up of the song YMCA with his recorder. My dad snooped, asked if the guy was gay, then laughed loudly as he walked off. Apparently, men playing music makes them gay. Story 81. Use an umbrella. Guy's excuse not to visit his mom in the hospital was that it was raining and he couldn't use an umbrella. The mother, sadly, felt that was a good excuse. Story 82. You'll never get over the fact there are some men out there who legit refuse to wipe there because touching there would be gay. Imagine walking around smeared with all day to own the libs. Story 83. I know an acquaintance who once went on a date with a man who didn't wipe after doing N2 in the toilet. His reasoning was that straight man shouldn't get used to touching and fingering around there. If you're wondering what everyone was wondering, yes, it allegedly smelled over his clothes. I wish I was joking. Story 84. Buy wine coolers. That were for his girlfriend, along with other alcohol, for a party at their place. He said I'm not buying those as long as these are attached, while grabbing his crotch.